Final half hour of the Hoffman Show here on the Team 980. Always live as well on the free Odyssey app. And it's our pleasure to welcome back to the show a senior writer who writes about sports media for The Athletic, Andrew Marchand. Andrew, how are you, sir?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
Doing well. I know it's a busy day. This big story that you broke earlier about the NBA's TV rights, so we really appreciate your time. On the most baseline level for the audience that maybe hasn't seen this yet, what was agreed to today and how final, and we can unpack the how final part in a second, but how final is this agreement?
Well, a couple of things. So what's happened right now, ESPN and TNT Sports own the rights for the NBA to broadcast their games for the next year. After that, NBA has a new agreement with ESPN to continue to be the home of the finals for the next 11 years. And then they also have new 11-year deals with both Amazon Prime Video, so just available on streaming, and then also NBC Sports, which would be available on NBC, and also Peacock, their streaming service. TNT Sports still has matching rights. Well, they believe they do. The NBA is not as certain that they can do that. So it's going to go to the Board of Governors on Tuesday. That's kind of a formality. The league's owners will accept the deal, and then after it will be sent to TNT Sports, and they can decide to match or threaten to match to see if they can elicit maybe some other games from the NBA or perhaps just highlights and continue to do inside the NBA. But that's where it stands right now.
So on the TNT piece of it, which is obviously a big deal to a lot of folks, it's where many of us have been watching the NBA for years, and obviously Inside as a show becomes much less of a possibility if they don't actually have the NBA, and who doesn't love Inside the NBA? What are the arguments on both sides of the NBA not really thinking TNT has an ability to match here, and TNT saying, yeah, we do. They obviously have the right to, but like, what's the technical disconnect here where one side seems to think that they can, and the NBA is like, you don't really have what it takes here to match?
Well, that's really a question for lawyers, and I haven't seen the contracts, and so it's a little complicated. But the layman's term is that the new deals are different than what Turner has currently. Turner currently just splits the package with ESPN, the national packages. ESPN has a little bit better deal as they can put the finals and other games on ABC, and Turner only puts, has the conference final is the best, is the highest they go. So this deal is split between Amazon and NBC, and there are each year Amazon will have a conference final, and then the next year NBC will have it. ESPN has it every year in these new deals. So the argument is we didn't negotiate the same deal that you had previously. TNT's stance is, no, those are our games. You split them up the way you want. We're still allowed to just match the $1.8 billion per year that Amazon is negotiated. But the NBA would say, well, they have 200 million subscribers to Amazon Prime, which is an estimate, and Warner Brothers Discovery, which owns TNT, that's in 65 million homes, and then whatever Max is in, it's not the same. It's not apples to apples. We want to do business with Amazon. I don't think they think the NBC deal is way too much money, so they're not going to match NBC, and then they don't have the right to match ESPN.
Andrew Marchand, senior writer for The Athletic, with us here on The Hoffman Show. Andrew, it was such an interesting year. Interesting is one way to describe it for ESPN's NBA coverage. Of course, the in-game broadcast, I'll ask you about in a second, went through multiple changes and is going to go through more. But then there was all of this public criticism, and well-deserved, for their pre- and halftime and post-game coverage, much of it around the fact that it's just yet another Stephen A. Smith production. Does the league have any thoughts that they've perhaps expressed on this thing? And is there anything contractually where the league has any say on how the team or how the outlets actually produce their coverage?
Well, a couple of things there. Number one, a year ago, Jeff Van Gundy, Mark Jackson, they were let go. So there was a new finals team in place this year. It went through a couple of generations. At first, it was Doc Rivers and Doris Burke joining Mike Breen, and Doc went to Milwaukee. and he was succeeded by J.J. Redick, who now has gone to the Lakers. There's irony there because there was a feeling that one of the reasons, and I was told this, that they let go of Jeff Van Gundy is that he always wanted to coach again, even though he never had in 16, 17 years that he was there. He never went back, even if he did flirt with it. And so the NBA did not like Van Gundy making, criticizing the officials, and they made it known. Now, maybe I don't think they said you got to get rid of Jeff Van Gundy, but ESPN definitely knew going into these negotiations that the NBA didn't love Van Gundy. So getting rid of Van Gundy, I think that was part of the calculus there. And then, secondly, with the pregame show, it became too much about Stephen A. I mean, Stephen A. is ubiquitous. He's on First Take. He's on every show you can imagine. I think a pregame show is different than Hot Take show, where you have opinions left and right. It's more of let's get into a little bit into the strategy, a little more human interest. And they're showing Stephen A. walking into the arena like he's a player, which is kind of funny. And so I think when going forward, let's say Amazon, let's say NBC, get the packages. You look at NBC, they have Mike Tirico, they have Noah Eagle for play-by-play, so pretty strong there. Amazon has set its sights on Ian Eagle, who to me is probably the best NBA play-by-player in the business, to be their number one. They haven't signed him, of course, but I think they're hopeful to do that. So they're going to be pretty strong. I think that ESPN, with this investment of they're going to have the finals for the next 12 years, counting the last year of this current deal, and then 11 more in the new deal. I think that they're going to go big. I think they're going to look. I would not be surprised if they try to make a run at LeBron James if he ever retires. I think that's one guy. I just think they're going to try to make it feel bigger. I think one of the big criticisms for getting the pregame being too much about the Knicks, it just felt like if you told me the broadcast was a November game as opposed to June and the NBA Finals, I don't think it felt different enough. And I think they need to glam that up a little bit so it feels bigger.
Is that something that is going to be personnel driven, or is that something that is possible with their current personnel and perhaps treating it a little bit more seriously?
I would say it's both. I think one thing, I'm not a huge fan of Super Bowl. If you notice, the networks, whoever switches networks every year, they always come out with new graphics for the Super Bowl, which I always felt like was unneeded. But I kind of understand that. I mean, it's a Super Bowl. But I feel like for the NBA Finals, they should have different graphics. I think when you look at that screen, it should feel different. So I think that's one thing that you can do cosmetically. Number two is, I also feel as if, and this is, ESPN's a different animal. It's the biggest, it's the baddest. I always say it's still the Yankees of sports media, whatever you think of the Yankees. But, it's the biggest brand in the business. And they have tonnage, and they go 24/7. But I think that we've come to a time where you want to make these big events feel bigger, in which they've done a real good job with Monday Night Football. They've spent a ton of money with Joe Buck, Troy Aikman, and the Manning brothers. And now Bill Belichick is going to join the Manning brothers for part of the games each time they have those 10, 11 broadcasts per season. And so I think they're going to try to do that I would not be surprised if that's what they do with the NBA.
Andrew Marchand with us here on the Hoffman Show. Broke the story today. The NBA's got a new media deal. There's still some final I's to be dotted, T's to be crossed, but staying with ESPN for the finals, Amazon and NBC getting the rest of the games, barring TNT's ability to match, which we talked about 5 minutes ago. So if you're just joining us, hit the rewind button in the Odyssey app. When we talk about Stephen A., Andrew, and his potential role in their coverage, I know ESPN is also in the middle of negotiations with him in general. I think there's a lot of us as viewers of the network, and certainly I think a lot of us who work in sports media that would like to see a change in how he is utilized and kind of the first takeification of all parts of sports talk. But where do those negotiations stand, and what role does this deal play in where Stephen A. stands at ESPN and where they stand with him?
Well, look, his deal's up in a year. It's going to be for big money. He's making $12 million a year now. They've already offered 18. He wants 25. He wants to do other things. You see him on Fox News. You see him on News Nation. You see him everywhere. He has his own YouTube/podcast 3 days a week. So he's important to the network, but mostly, he's most important on First Take. If I were them, I'd probably say, look, why don't we stay at $12 million? but don't do all the rest of the stuff. Just do First Take. Let's make you exclusive to First Take, and then you can do anything else you want anywhere else. Go make another $13 million doing other things. That to me makes a lot of sense. I think less is a lot of times more. I just think he's everywhere, and I think that and he's a hard worker. I mean, the one thing you can criticize Stephen A. not like his take, think he's too over the top, et cetera, but at the end of the day, he is a guy who is going 24/7, and that you have to give credit to him for. And he has a style. I think his first run at ESPN was a little bit premature, as big as he got, and he got let go. But the second run, he got it down. He's a really experienced broadcaster now. I think the first time around, he was a writer trying to be a broadcaster, and he had some of the things, but it was a little bit too fast. Now he's experienced. He's done a lot of talk shows. I think media, there's not that many people who can do all three, can write, be on the radio, do TV. Stephen A. is one of them who's done it and successfully at all three. There's not that many. But it takes a while. It takes reps, and I think now he has it. And so it'll be interesting. It'll be Stephen A.'s free agency. It'll kind of be like one of these NBA guys' free agencies.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. For whatever it's worth, my 2 cents that you didn't ask for is exactly what your many more cents is as someone who actually covers this professionally, which is I have so much respect for what he does with First Take and the show he's built as someone who has a show and does it every day and talks for a lot of time, giving a lot of opinions. But Jesus, that guy's everywhere, and he just doesn't need to be. And I just have a hard time thinking he's got that much value to the network and that there aren't diminishing returns. But I guess the people making those decisions, the actual money, think differently. So there's that. Last thing, Andrew, on the NBA deal, what's the most interesting loose end to you? Whether it's, I mean, obviously the TNT piece, but I'm guessing where Inside potentially lands, the other talent, other production decisions. As someone who's followed this from square one, and we're at the second to last square, if you will, what's the most interesting loose end still to be tied here?
And I think what happens most likely with Barkley, to me, he's the best studio analyst of all time. I know he said he's going to retire. We'll see. TNT, I think they want him to continue working for them. They're expanding on their sports. Can they find a method to use him still? Keep Inside the NBA possibly together. I think that's something to watch. Could they get highlights and do that show still? I think that's kind of the most interesting. I'm very interested in who's going to be on. A lot of it's kind of answered. I mean, play-by-play. It's not answered yet fully, but I think we have a pretty good read on it. It's pretty strong on what these networks want to do. NBC already has it in-house. Obviously, with Mike Breen, Ryan Ruocco, ESPN's in good shape. They have a pretty good roster. Dave Pasch as well. And so I think you look at it and that those what happens with those personalities. And then the money. I mean, I do think this impacts the NFL. NFL can opt out in 7 years into their contract, 11-year deal that they just started last year, the first season. I think it makes it more likely when you look at ESPN's going to pay $2.6 billion a year. They're paying $2.7 billion for the NFL. So NFL's going to look at that and say, we're king. We're not just getting an extra measly $100 million extra from you. So I could see them trying to push past $3 billion from ESPN, and with all their deals, I think this raises the market for them. The rest of the market, with the way the media is, with streaming and the, just the total disarray that media is in, I think for smaller conferences and smaller leagues, I don't know if this is great news because I think they're gobbling up a lot of the money just as the NFL did.
It's Andrew Marchand, senior writer at The Athletic. Make sure you head there to read his coverage of this and everything else going on in sports media. Andrew, always a pleasure to have you, sir. Thank you.
Thanks, man.
Hey, this is DA, and you're listening to The Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and the Odyssey app.